What's happening, Wargamers? Welcome to another discussion from Aegis Brand Studios. As usual, I am Leland, and I am here to share my potato opinions with you. The first two times went so well, got people good and riled up, so I figured, why not? Let's do this again. So this week, let's talk about Brace for Impact. So remember, guys, if you like this content, be sure to go down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the discussion, about the points that I bring up here. Whether you disagree or agree, remember these are all just to get the talk going. And of course, if you do like it, consider going to patreon.com/AegisBrandStudios. A couple bucks a month keeps the lights on, keeps content current, allows me to keep making content for you guys, which I love, and it always makes me happy to see you guys enjoy it as well. So just keep that in mind while you're watching this video and maybe getting riled up by it. So Brace for Impact. This card is probably the It is the most taked tactic card in the game of Marvel Crisis Protocol. Its utility for what it does for you is just insanely beneficial, with extremely good cost to benefit basically ratio on that one. For those of you who don't know, Brace to Impact is basically when a character would suffer damage from a collision. Any character can spend one power and basically ignore that damage. So usually this means, like, if a piece of terrain is getting thrown at a character, or if another character is getting thrown at one of your characters, you can use Brace for Impact. You can just ignore the damage. On paper, that sounds pretty good. So why would this be a problem? Well, Brace in and of itself isn't so much of a problem. I think what Brace does is it's more what it indicates might be an issue with the game, or where a part of the game might be getting a little out of hand, and that is with the power of throws. Back when the game first came out, in the early year, there wasn't a lot of character throws. They were kind of more restricted to larger characters. Hulk had one, Venom had one, I think MODOK had a terrain throw. So for a good while, we didn't have a lot of ways of tossing that terrain around. So something like Brace for Impact was a very powerful card, but it also wasn't a card that was necessarily needed. It was still taking quite a lot, but it wasn't necessarily needed. As the years went on, we have seen more characters come out that have more throws, more character throws, but we've also seen a change in the design space that AMG is approaching throws in that we're seeing less and less character throws as superpowers, and more often they are getting attached to a trigger on an attack. That's not a blanket rule, it's not happening on everything, but that is something that we're kind of seeing here. Now, why exactly are throws a problem? Well, throws will take the size of whatever's being thrown. It's going to add +1 to that, and that is the damage that's being done. This is damage that the attacking player does not have to roll for. If they are throwing a size 3 character or size 3 piece of terrain, that is just 4 damage that's going on to the defender, and the onus is on them to basically block it with their dodge roll. That is what makes Brace so powerful. It is an ability for a character to basically just say, no, I don't want to take this damage, and move on. So why are we talking about it today? Well, Brace gets added into so many rosters. It is almost a de facto card, with a lot of people discussing how it is just always stapled on. It is one of your 2 restricted cards no matter what to a lot of people. This in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does kind of create a stagnant and stale environment for the game to exist in. If there are cards that are just always being taken, it means that there are a lot of cards that aren't being explored. AMG has attempted to resolve this by moving it onto the restricted list, which means, you can only take that and one other restricted card. I don't think they'd ever go as far as to get rid of the card. I think the way throws work in this game, that Brace is too strong of a card, or at least too useful of a card, that you kind of need to keep it around. But what it does mean is that we get into a really tricky situation that design can almost be stunted a little bit because of how ubiquitous Brace is as a card. So what do we do to address Brace? Do we remove it off the restricted? Do we change throw mechanics? Well, let's explore a couple of these options. A couple other notable people in the MCP community have made the case for Brace being removed from the restricted list. I am personally one of the people who agree with this approach. I think removing Brace from the restricted list means that, 1, you might start seeing some other cards used, and 2, people might start exploring options to, maybe deal with throws in other ways. This might sound a little counterintuitive because Brace, it's a great card. You want to be able to stop that damage. And part of the thought that I have here with removing Brace from it is just, everyone's taking it anyway. So why punish the players for taking Brace? You know it's going to be taken, and by putting it on the restricted list, you're basically saying, like, you know, you can take this card. It's always going to be reserved for that slot. Just open it up. Just make it an open card for people to use, that they don't have to use it, and maybe start seeing some value in some of the other restricted cards. I think part of this also means that it opens up new decision points for the players in the roster making process as well. If Brace is no longer on the restricted card, does that mean that a player will just shift over to another restricted? So instead of Brace, are they going to take, say, Indomitable and Sacrifice, and then for their other 3 cards, does Brace just automatically get slotted in there? Well, if so, that's taking the spot of another card. That could be an affiliated card, it could be a character card, or it could just be a good generic tactics card, or even a leadership card, because that's the other part of the equation that we have to look at. Now that we're getting a lot more leadership cards, we are, you know, shrinking the pool of available cards just in general. So I like where that comes from a decision making point on the game, that removing Brace from the restricted list potentially gets people looking at their lists. They might very well just say, okay, well, Brace is still going in there, and hey, now I can take Sacrifice and Researcher, or I can take Indomitable and Sacrifice, or something like that. And that's fine. The point is, it becomes a player choice on that one. One of the other things that comes up when it comes to the discussion of Brace is, does that mean throws are too powerful? Right now, with throws doing size +1 in damage, that is a lot of damage that can be tossed out to a character. And quite often, you're only rolling 3, maybe 4 dice to try and block this, which means if you're getting hit with a size 4 or larger item, unless you're rolling a crit, there's no way you can block all the damage for it. So that's one reason why Brace is so powerful in that regard, and why a lot of people take it. So the question becomes, like, does that mean throws need to be looked at? Do they need to maybe reduce the frequency of throws, or maybe reduce the +1 that comes with it? The problem with that is that now we're starting to look at a core mechanic aspect of the game, with that +1 damage being a very core mechanic of it. I think that mechanic made a lot of sense when there weren't as many throws in the game. But now that we're approaching, I think actually we might have hit 200 unique characters in the game, or close to that, there's a lot of throws in this game, both terrain and character throws. And there's a lot more instances where that extra damage can really become difficult to deal with. And it also kind of raises the question, is Brace as valuable? You're stopping the one throw going into a character, but if the other player already has like 3-4 more throws lined up, how powerful is that Brace? Does it need to be restricted as a result? When throws were rarer, having that restriction meant that you're restricting it based on how useful, how powerful it was for you. But now that there are, 2-3 other characters on any given team that can usually throw as well, and add that +1 damage to it and all that's a lot of damage that's still coming in, and Brace is one-time use. So I know this sounds kind of rambling and whatnot, but it does mean that we might need to take a look at the core mechanic for that one, because that is a lot of unanswerable damage that is basically being staved off by one card. And it's one card that's a one-and-done use, and it's nowhere near prolific enough to stop kind of the greater issue of throw damage on that. So that brings us kind of the third point that's always floated around with Brace for Impact. And that's the idea of making it just a free 6th tactic card that every player gets when they build their team. I think this one's a really interesting one. We know players are taking Brace more often than not. Like, as we've already established, it is one of the most taken, if not the most taken tactic card in the game. So if we're going to play around with changing core mechanics, why not just make this a core mechanic of the game, that the team gets one free Brace? You can get rid of Brace for Impact from the tactic card selection completely. Make a core mechanic saying that once per game you can do that Brace to protect you from damage, and then maybe start looking at some other solutions. This is probably the one that I think kind of makes the most sense in the state of the game, in the sense that there's so many throws. Why punish players by forcing them to take Brace to try and mitigate even just one of those throws? Allow them to start exploring some other cards. Open up that part of the list building, that part of roster building, to exclude the necessity of Brace. So yeah, that's kind of the weird state that we are in for Brace of Impact. None of these are solutions to Brace, but none of them are. I think all of them are worth the discussion. And other people who are more deep into the weeds in this game than I am have had these discussions, and I heavily encourage you to kind of go and look those ones up. But in the meantime, I want to hear your thoughts on Brace for Impact. Is the card good for the game? Do you think the card needs to go? Do you think it's still needed in this current meta, or do you think it's needed even more in the current meta and state of Marvel Crisis Protocol? Sound off in those comments below, and as always, we'll see you next time. Happy wargaming.